Hello, my name is Brent Hunt, and we're continuing the explanation of what I call this particular book by William Norman Grigg, Grigg, America's Engineered Decline. This is the appendix number one. This will be Descendant into Degeneracy. Descendant into Degeneracy. There's a quote. Let us create public schools where as soon as they are weaned, young may be reared, installed therein as ward, hear that is a key word, as wards of the state. The child can forget even his mother's name. After he has grown up, let him in turn couple indiscriminately, democratically with his mates and brethren, doing as his parents did before him. Marquise de Sade, Sade. Hear that again. As a ward. You are considered a ward of the state, folks. Another quote. Satan is a word which represents rebellion, represents man, represents a defiance towards society and God and the things that are forced upon us and are considered normal and acceptable. There's a distinct lack of leadership, idols, icons, and superstars for kids to identify with. America needs that anti-Christ figure, that anti-hero to save these kids from the oppression of the right-wing morality. This is from a gentleman named it's a transvestite, Goth rocker, Goth rocker, Marilyn Manson, self-described minister in the Church of Satan. So what is, that tells you something. Let me get to the last quote here. Quote from President Bill Clinton. My only enemy is right-wing religious fundamentalists. Do you see the whole idea here is that without morals? I'm not in favor of all the right-wing things here, folks. That's not what I'm about. And I do see the issues with right-wing religious fundamentalists too. But I also understand simply is that morals are key. But morals are taught in family, not in the churches. Okay. But if you don't have a good family, you don't have anybody that's morally involved there, then you're going to have some really struggles in your life. So let's continue. For decades, Super Bowl Sunday has been an American middle class intuition. Whatever it may say about our priorities as a culture, the Super Bowl has become a secular holiday. Easily the most popular television spectacle, the game and its trappings provide a sense of national communion unmatched by any other event, attracting the eager eyes of tens of millions of Americans of all races, creeds, and colors, and team loyalties. This is what makes the event irresistible to advertisers who pay exorbitant rates to hawk their products to a global televised audience. As the MTV produced halftime show at the 2004 Super Bowl illustrated, the event is similar irresistible to the agents of cultural subversion. During the intermission of a contested game, the New England Patriots and the Carolina Panthers surrendered the stage to what was appropriately described as a collection of seemingly drug indifferent, ridiculing pagan figures. These were not living human beings in action, continually cultural critic Michael Novak, but rather sacks of flesh, writhing, grinding, pawing, acting out no higher appeal than bodily functions. A more radical anti-Jewish and anti-Christian assault, embodying the sort of Wagnerian images of pagan disgust and decadencies that enraptured Hitler's audiences would be hard for them to produce. As if any conscious disdain for its middle-class audience, the producers of MTV halftime spectacle organized an antic parade of filthy-mouthed rappers, borderline simian figures, rhythmically chanting obscenities. The stand-up of this degenerate collection was Kid Rock, a talentless, grease-haired flack of urban flotsam whose output, like most rap music, is riddled with 12-letter profanities. During the halftime show, Kid Rock celebrated America's favorite sporting event by garbing himself in a poncho fashioned from a desecrated American flag. The halftime show also centerpiece featured Janet Jackson clad in a sci-fi dominatrix Get Up, singing a duo with pop artist Justin Timberlake. Surrounding the singers were a troupe of dancers pantomiming sexual acts. The song refrain was the assistant promised that Timberlake would get Jackson naked by the number ends. A sentimental argument punctuated by Timberlake tearing off a portion of Jackson's wardrobe, exposing one of her breasts. The incident had intended, in effect, generating a media fury eclipsing the game itself, a cliffhanger featuring several lead changes and a winning field goal with 4 seconds remaining, and providing a FCC investigation. While the NFL indigenously denounced the MTV-produced halftime show, media critic Sally Jenkins pointed out that the league's protests, ever what she probably calls soft porn theater, was a little impossible. Exactly what did the league expect when it rented the MTV culture, you see, Jenkins asked. What happened during the halftime show was that a bunch of leering, irrelevant, screaming rock stars decided to make the NFL pay for its pretensions and profit-seeking. The point was obvious. Let's commandeer the audience of 100 million for ourselves. That's a good point. And let us exploit their fun for the whole family, and while you're at it, buy a Ford or Cadillac sensibility. The NFL tried to use MTV and got used back. This is not to say that the generation that tainted the 2004 Super Bowl was limited to the halftime festivities. Many of the event's advertising spots had almost a frat house overtone that included bathroom humor. Pointed out one review, as usual, many of the biggest advertisers focus on making videos yuck it up, but often with crude and lewd jokes. One year after a somewhat subdued Super Bowl atmosphere in which America was preparing for a war in Iraq, advertisers let loose with an R-rated comedy club for the Super Bowl viewers. One of these responsible for choreographing the righteous festival of debauchery brazenly described the game plan. It was a good mirror of what's going on in TV overall, commented Donnie Dusha, CEO of an advertising firm that created several of the Super Bowl ads. Dumb is funny. In many ways, it's a continuation of the dumbing down of America. Yeah, dumb is funny, isn't it? Look around you. People are completely oblivious to what's going on in the last 3 years in this country. For some, propagating, and it's not just here in this country, it's worldwide. For some, propagating stupidity is lucrative, at least for a while, but those with a more sober perspective understand that stupidity is not among the middle-class values, such as discipline, thrift, appetite for self-improvement, self-sacrifice on behalf of one's posterity. That created our national prosperity. A debauched and dumbed down culture is not one that will long remain prosperous and free. Yeah, very much so true. But the true ironic thing about the controversy triggered by Super Bowl halftime show is this. Repelling though it was, is entirely typical of the popular culture in which American youth are immersed, and the impact of that toxic culture can be felt in even respectable American communities. Next area, lost children. Rockdale County, Georgia seemed to exemplify middle-class America. The Atlanta suburb played host to the equestrian event during the 1996 Summer Olympics. The local economy was strong. The county school system was well funded. Most residents of Conyers, the only town in the county, were materially comfortable and active in local churches. This came as a shock when a syphilis outbreak reoccurred among Rockdale teenagers in the spring of 1996. Local health officials investigated the outbreak, discovered behind Rockdale's middle-class facade a culture of predatory, promiscuous rivalry, or even surpassing that of the worst slums. It was not uncommon when all the young people would get together to engage in group sex, commented that is Professor Claire Sturt of the nearby Emory University School of Public Health. In the 1999 PBS Frontline documentary, The Lost Children of Rockdale County, there was group sex going on in terms of one guy having sex with one of the girls and then the next guy having sex with the same girl. There was group sex going on in terms of one girl having sex with multiple male partners at the same time, multiple females having sex with each other at the same time. I would say that the only type of group sex that I did not hear about in the overall protection was a group sex between just guys. Registered nurse, that is Cynthia Noel, who was among those who discovered the epidemic, referred to the 14-year-old girls with 20, 30, 40, 50, or 100 sex partners. You expect that of someone who's more into the line of being a prostitute or something. But according to the Middle School Guidance Council, Peggy Cooper, the group's sex incidents involved girls as young as 12 years old. Their parents were often gone, observed Cooper, and they said they were watching the Playboy channel in the girls' bedroom, and there would be like 10 or 12 of them up there. One young boy told Cooper about the game their group had devised in which you have to imitate what the Playboy people are doing. Another boy told her that there may be 3 or 4 of us at one time. It doesn't matter if you're 2 guys or 2 girls or a girl and a guy. It doesn't matter. You just have to do what they're doing. Another participant in the sex games recalled another party at which a young girl, equipped with a bag of condoms we got from the health department, set out to have sex with every boy in the room. The boys at the party were lined up. It was like they were from the bedroom door to the front door, and then she came out. She thought it was the coolest thing. The most horrifying segment of the program was an interview with these students identified as Katie, Bridget, and Christine, who at the time were between 12 and 14 years of age. Like many of their friends, their waif-like girls were devoted fans of hip-hop and hardcore rap music, a supposedly art form produced by the guttery dregs of the inner-city criminal subculture. Liberal communist Bob Herbert describes such music as the soundtrack of a Lord of the Flies street culture that is seducing one generation after another of black children and producing freakish entertainments like Nettie and 50 Cent. Nettie, who was among the performers featured at Super Bowl 38, is a rapper from St. Louis whose breakthrough was entitled Pimp Juice. 50 Cent's the best-selling artist of 2003 hit the big time with a diddly entitled Pimp, P-I-M-P, another celebration of street prostitution. The world inhabited by such allergic musicians is an inner-city hellhole in which women are sexually playthings and males are willing to murder each other over any perceived offense. You've got insane young men who take their heavily argument into the streets and shoot up the neighborhood, and then go back inside to listen to music that they celebrate the act of shooting up the neighborhood, famous Herbert. Katie, Bridget, and Christine live in an almost entirely white middle-class suburb rather than an inner-city ghetto. But the culture of death, a full-service industry, delivers to the suburbs, you see. Through MTV, those young girls become immersed in the hip-hop lifestyle. Prompted by the interview, the 3 girls, children, lapse into something akin to a rhythmic trance while reciting the words to one of their favorite rap songs. Anti-mating it, explicit celebration of group sex. Is that something anybody does around here? Requires a report of, lots of people, a lot of people, the girls reply. Just as shocking is the observation by one health worker that the girls who were involved in Rockdale County orgies were not homeless. They were not abused in any way. They were just normal, everyday, regular kids. And to underscore this point, the document describes the goings-on in the nearby Panama City, Florida, a playground for teenagers from all over the county, all over the country. According to the narration, at the height of the season, thousands of high school students jam the 2-lane highway and crowd the beaches, partying all night. Fights break out spontaneous. Kids have sex in full view on the sand and on motel balconies overlooking the strip. The wages of this perverse freedom enjoyed by Rockdale County youth were not limited to venereal disease. On May 20th, 1999, 1 month to the day after the hideous Columbine massacre, Conyers experienced his own school shooting. The cultivated corruption. The experience of Rockdale County was shocking precisely because the community itself was so ordinary. Snudging insensate with the Bible Belt, firmly entrenched in the red state America, Rockdale offers no haven from the dominant post-Christian culture. It was as if Mayberry had been transformed into Gomorrah. Rockdale seemed to experience a harmonical convergence of troubling social trends. Overworked parents working up to 60 hours a week to retain a middle-class lifestyle. Overscheduled school children, most passionately connected to their peers, tend to their families. Aggressive, immoral, school-based sex education system typified by the bag of condoms toted by the young girl at the party mentioned above, and a deeply subversive, sex-saturated popular culture. The lost children of Rockdale County are tragically typical of many American youth. This is not a reflection of cultural drift, but rather a cultural hijacking. The lost youth didn't simply wander away. They have been carefully and deliberately misled as part of a scheme intended to capture our culture. The late cultural commentary named Richard Grinder observed that capture the culture was the battle cry of Italian communist leader Antonio Gramsci, consigned to prison by Mussolini, a one-time ally who imposed a different brand of militant collectivists on Italy. Gramsci formulated in his prison notebooks, you need to hear this, folks, this is very important. No one knows who this guy is. No one. Very few people in political science even know who this guy is, but he's important. Gramsci formulated in his prison notebooks the doctrine that those who want to change society must change man's consciousness. That in order to accomplish this, they must first control the institutions by which that consciousness is formed. Schools, universities, churches, and perhaps above all, art and the communication industry, recalls Grinner. It is these institutions that shape and articulate public opinion, the limits of which few politicians can violate with impunity. Culture, that is, Gramsci felt, is not simply the superstructure of an economic base, the role assigned to it in orthodox Marxism, but it is central to a society. Gramsci urges those who sought to bring about a revolution in the state to pursue the steady, implement subversion of free societies by conducting a long march through the institutions. I'll say that again. It's the long march through the institutions. The Gramsci idea, I'm going off now, track on to share, is the long march. The communists gave up pretty much on what we call, eventually gave up on the idea of trying to conquer the West, destroying it, and they decided to do what I call a Trojan horse, and that's what they've been doing. That's part of the Frankfurt School. That's part of Tavistock. That's part of Columbia University here in America. Then Columbia University is known as a teacher school for a long time. I don't know what it is now, but that's what it was once known as. So they used, they taught these teachers, and these teachers went in and brought in their ideas. Most people don't almost 100% of these people have no idea what's going on, folks. They just hear what they hear and they practice it. They just do it. In some ways, the Gramsci approach is kindred to that pursued by the British Fabian socialists who chose patient gradualism rather than violent insurrection as the most effective means to collectivize society. Gramsci's distinctive insight was to urge Marxists to escape from the shackles of economic theory and focus instead on society's cultural organs, that is, the press, the media, education, entertainment, religion, and the family. In order for revolutionaries to establish political leadership or hegemony, advised Gramsci, they must not count solely on the power and material force of government. They must change the culture upon which that government was built. We'll read some of his works, hopefully, in the next few months. Irredeemable depravity. Many cultural commentators target the 1960s as the decade which our Gramsci cultural revolution took hold. But the revolution actually occurred decades before its effects began to be noticed. In his monumental 1966 study, that is Tragedy and Hope, the late Georgetown University historian Carroll Quigley observed the period since 1950 has seen the beginning of a revolutionary change in American politics. This change is not so closely related to changes in American economic life as it is to the transformation in social life. What has been happening has been a disintegration of the middle class. This integration of the middle class had a variety of causes, some of them intrinsic, many of them accidentally, a few of them obvious, but many of them going deeply into the very depths of social existence. All these causes acted to destroy the middle class by acting to destroy the middle class outlook. The chief internal cause of the disintegration of the middle class described by Quigley was not economic adversity, but rather the failure of that class to transfer its outlook to its children. A failure that occurred chiefly within the middle class family. The most important external cause was the relentless attack on middle class values and institutions in literature and in drama throughout most of the 20th century. In fact, it's difficult to find works that defend this outlook or even assume it to be true, as was frequently in the 19th century. By mid-century, popular literature, drama, cinema, and the embryonic medium of television trafficked in violence, social irresponsibility, sexual laxity, and perversion. human weakness in relation to alcohol, narcotics, or sex. The philosophical basis for this attack was found in an oversimplified Freudism that regarded all suppression of human impulses as leading to frustration and psychic distortion that made subsequently life unattainable. Thus, novel after novel, or play after play, portrayed the wickedness of the suppression of good, healthy, natural impulses and the salutary consequences of self-indulgence, especially in sex. Adultery and other manifestations of undisciplined sexuality were described as in increasingly clinical detail. The results of this revolt against the middle class, Quigley points out, was a total reversal of middle class values by presenting an interesting or admirable simple negation of these values by aimless, shiftless, and totally irresponsible people. The entertainment industry was overwhelmed with swamps of perversions ranging from homosexuality, incest, to sadism, cannibalism, necrophilia, and copropedia. Easy for me to say. Bear in mind that Quigley wrote these words in the mid-1960s. That was the era when television censors wouldn't allow Barbara Eden, the buxom star of the sitcom I Dream of Jeannie, to display her navel, an era which most local communities still had and enforced blue laws, anti-obscenity ordinance, and other codes of public morality. It was a time prior to the 1969 Stonewall riot that inaugurated the homosexual revolution and the Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, sinking down state anti-abortion laws. As one who had privileged access to the papers and secret records of the power elite, Quigley was describing not only what was taking place at the farthest fringes of racial culture, but also what the radicals and their establishment mentors planned to inflict on our nation. The chapter from which these accusations are taken, entitled The Future in Perspective. The exponents of revolution denigrate the biblical view of man as a special creation of God, placed a little lower than the angels. As Quigley pointed out, the revolutionaries view man as lower than any animal would naturally descend. From this has emerged the Puritan view of man, but without the Puritan view of God as a creation of total depravity in a determinist universe without hope of any redemption. To what end would this be done? Quigley pointed out that the one strain of puritanism was invoked in the 16th and 17th centuries, most notably in Thomas Hobbes' essay Leviathan, to justify despotism in the name of public order. I'll say that again. Quigley pointed out that the one strain of Puritanism was invoked in the 16th and 17th century, most notably in Thomas Hobbes' essay Leviathan, to justify despotism in the name of public order. The new doctrine of depravity now may be used with petty bureaucracy, lower and lower middle class support to justify a new despotism to preserve by force instead of conviction petty bureaucratic values in a system of compulsory conformity. In a self-governing society, which is what I believe in, public morality and private morality cannot be segregated. People who have abandoned that George Washington referred to as the eternal rules of order and right be incapable of exercising the self-discipline necessary to maintain a free government. They won't. They fall into a trance. In his farewell address, Washington advised that there is no truth more thoroughly established than that there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maxims of honest and magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. When such habits of virtue are cultivated and preserved, society can enjoy the blessings of limited government. Of course, one that will, in Jefferson's words, restrain men from injuring one another, and which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it had earned. Once those moral habits are discarded or deliberately destroyed through subversion, the despotism of the total state becomes the only alternate to anarchy. And this is precisely the plan followed by Gramsci's disciples. Continue. Elitist smut peddler axis. In an aborted investigation conducted in 1954, Tennessee Congressman Carroll Reece, R-E-E-C-E, exposed significant evidence of the Gramsci network laboring to destroy the American middle class. The Reece Committee, probing the connections between tax-exempt foundations in various subversive organizations, most notably the Council on Federal Reserve, Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, working to bring about our nation's submersion in a global government. The inquiry also examines the work of left-leaning social scientists such as Alfred Kinsey, Kinsey. What a sick pervert he was, folks. We're going to be reading his book too. No, not his book, but a book that was written about him. And legal activities destroy our country's moral foundation. These cultural revolutions warned Congressman Reese sought to create a public culture in which there are no absolutes, that everything is indeterminated, that no standard of conduct, morals, ethics, and government are to be deemed inviolate. That everything, including basic moral law, is subject to change, and that it is the part of the social scientists to take no principle for granted as a premise in social or judicial reasoning. However, fundamentally, it may also here, though, have been deemed to be under our Judeo-Christian moral system. One of the most consequential benefactors of Foundation findings, particularly from the Rockefellers, was Alfred C. Kinsey, lead author of the 1948 report, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. Former Kinsey Institute advisor James H. Jones, who knew Kinsey's, intimately described the renowned sexuology as a militant homosexual who sought to demolish American conventional morality. Wardell Pomeroy, I'm spelling Pomeroy, P-O-M-E-R-O-Y, a close associate of Kinsey, recalls that Kinsey knew a great deal about the Judeo-Christian tradition, and he was indignant about what it had done to our culture. In their report on male sexuality, Kinsey and his associates candidly expressed the view that healthy sexuality ignores all distinctive regarding right and wrong, illicit or licit, and normal and abnormal, acceptable and unacceptable. The subjects used by Kinsey as a supposedly representative sample of American society were recruited from homosexual bars and called for the ranks of sexual offenders in order to demonstrate that human beings are sexual creators, practically from birth. Kinsey and his comrades conducted ghastly experiments involving the clinical molestation of newborn infants. I'll say that again. He did experiments involving the clinical molestation of newborn infants. That's pretty sick, folks. No, it's not pretty sick. That's fucking sick. Among those who collaborated with Kinsey was René Guyon, a French Marxist and pederast who coined the saying, sex by age 8 or else it's too late. According to international sexologist Dr. Harry Benjamin, associate of both Kinsey and Guyon, Guyon declared a deconstruction legal theory of sexual liberation, fortifying it with Kinsey's scientific data. It was put into the hands of legal radicals like Morris Ernest as an advocate for this new sexual order, who handled revolutionary cases in his war against the American legal order. To bring about the sexual revolution, nothing less than the ultimate demolition of the existing legal culture would suffice. In Ernest's 1948 book, America's Sexual Behavior and Kinsey Report, Kinsey's colleague Robert Dickerson claimed that virtually every page of Kinsey's report touches on some section of the legal code. A reminder that the law, like our social pattern, falls lamely short of being based on knowledge of facts. Harmonizing American law with Kinsey's perverted vision of sexual emancipation became the mission of Ernest and his revolutionary associates. Ernest was wired into Gramsci Network. He is affiliated with the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, the Sexual Information Educational Council of the United States, and the Planned Parenthood of America. He's also enjoyed close ties to Supreme Court Justice Brandeis, Brennan, and Frankfurt, and Judge Learned Hand, all of whom were key judicial change agents in removing legal protection for conventional morality, the traditional family, and the sanctity of life. Another of Kingsley's key legal allies was Professor Herbert Wechsler, W-E-C-H-S-L-E-R, a noted legal scholar at Columbia University, a one-time close confidant of President Franklin Roosevelt, and a member of the National Lawyers Guild, a legal front for the Communist Party. Drawing on Kingsley's research, Wechsler composed a model penal code for American legal institution, what they call ALI, a Rockefeller and Carnegie subsidized educational arm of the American Bar Association. The key element of that moral statute, what lawyers would call the gray men, is that there would be no criminal penalties for consensual sexual relations conducted in private. The next year, the all-model penal code was immediately touted as a model to state legislation. Ernest urged his Gramsci comrades to establish a committee on the law of sexual behavior and consider their own state legal system in this field. In short order, these committees were established with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, and using the model penal code as their model, these committees began working for new laws that either eliminated or trivialized sex crimes, from homosexuality to public indecency. At the same time, Ernest's comrades in the federal court system, including allies on the Supreme Court, carried a flanking attack against states and communities that didn't toe the ALI line. In a stream of decisions dealing with contraceptions, Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965, Eisenstadt versus Blair, 1972, Carey versus Popular Service International, 1977, and Pornography, Miller versus California, 1973, and Abortion, Roe versus Wade, and Doe versus Bulletin in 1973. The Supreme Court usurped the state government's reserved rights and powers to set a social policy regarding moral issues. Many of the libertarians or libertine persuasion these developments were a welcome emancipation of the individual from oneness laws regulating moral conduct. But the crusade to liberate the libido had contributed greatly to the demolition of the constitutional powers reserved to the states and local communities, while simultaneously enhancing the powers of the central government, which is always a problem. You'll have to watch the central government. Back to the whole thing. And the horrifying experience at Rockdale County, as well as thousands of other communities, illustrate the sexual revolution had entered its own reign of terror. Social marketing of pornography. For Rockdale County, lost children pornography, specifically the Playboy channel, offer detailed tutorials in sexual degeneration. This is entirely in keeping with the purpose of modern pornography. Rather than simply catering to purist interests, porn carries out a revolutionary function. Let me take a break right here and sip the water. Speaking in the 1980s, Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy Empire, boasted, "The generation now running society is the first Playboy generation. Playboy and its descendants have done more than any other institution, judicial reading or medial organ, to propagate Kinsley's gospel of post-Christian sexual emancipation." Dr. Judah Reisman collaborated on the grim reality behind Hefner's triumph. This is largely a Playboy-reared society as well. It is a Kingsley-reared society as well, too. Hefner and Kinsley share the responsibility for a generation of heterophobia, fear and distrust of the opposite sex, widespread drug use and addiction, impotence and homosexuality, suicide, astronomical divorce rates, epidemics of venereal disease, and AIDS. Both Kinsley and Hefner battle for the elimination and liberalization of sexual laws. Eventually, tens of thousands of criminals, primary sex offenders, were paroled back into society. The measure of success for Kingsley and Hefner have been seen everywhere. Post Kinsley Hefner, the profession of sexology was created to cope with a massive increase in cases of sexual disorder. Building on a fraudulent research base, sexology crept into higher education, medicine, counseling, therapy, law, and public policy. Public policy is, again, it used to be public law. They destroyed that. That's back in the 1930s under Franklin Roosevelt. Sex and AIDS education, curriculum, and political lobbying. Hefner's empire created a tax-exempt foundation to reinvest a portion of its extravagant profits in funding subversive research. Playboy is one of the most important magazines in the world. In terms of impact, it had not only on social morals, but as a champion of individual rights, boasted Hefner in 1974. We're supporting countless civil liberties organizations, political reform, sex research, and education, abortion reform before it becomes popular, prison reform, and the continual campaign to reform our repressive sex and drug laws. Indeed, following the Supreme Court 1973 Roe versus Wade decision abolishing state laws protecting the unborn human being from abortion, Playboy conspicuously cut itself in for a share of the credit. The Playboy Foundation participated in the movement that won a major court victory. Crow, the magazine's January 1974 issue, The victory came with last January's Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion. This was especially gratifying because of the Foundation's long campaign for reform, which began in 1966. Incredibly as it may seem, Hefner and his creation have actually been embraced by some self-styled conservatives, like William F. Buckley Jr., the media design leader of the American conservatism, has been a frequent contributor to the papers of Hefner's smut sheet, that is National Review. Hefner's smut sheet, National Review, Buckley's magazine, ran not one but two laundry pieces marking the 50th anniversary of Hefner's porn empire. One of them insisted that Playboy really does have something to do with freedom, and thus days may be that worth remembering. A society that allowed Playboy is not a society that allows women to be stoned to death for adultery. Indeed not. On the basis of our national experience, we can safely say that the society that allows Playboy will, within the course of a generation, embrace, legalize, and subsidize child killing, and repeal many of the laws intended to protect women from sexual violence. Godfather of the smut industry, but Hefner has long been eclipsed, both as a porn kingpin and a social activist, by Harvard educator Philip Harvey, the so-called godfather of the porn industry. From his redoubt in Hillsborough, North Carolina, Harvey operated PHE Incorporated, the national largest distributor of hardcore porn videos and other sex-related products. Like mafia chieftains tracking into New York City to confer with the commission, heading Las Cruces Nostrils, the leading production of smut films regularly traveled to Hillsborough in search of financing and project approval. Harvey himself regularly treks to Washington, D.C. to supervise Population Services International, a nonprofit corporation that works closely with the federal government and the international organization to promote population control overseas. To Harvey, peddling porn and promoting an anti-natal agenda are part of the same mission, which he describes as social marketing, applying the power and creativity of the private sector for family planning. In 1969, as a graduate student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Harvey received a grant from the Ford Foundation, a major underwriter of cultural subversion, to do graduate work on family planning. His graduate thesis was a proposal for mail order marketing of condoms, a revolutionary idea that essentially served as a business proposal for PHE Incorporated. For his first few years, Harvey's mail order business floundered. His fortunes turned around, however, when he began to include erotic photographs in his catalog. In 1975, Harvey introduced the Adam and Eve catalog with marketing sex ads and hardcore pornography, along with social responsible contraceptives. Most importantly, Harvey's mail order business, which the Supreme Court really made possible by overturning laws against interstate commerce and pornography. Interesting key, folks. Let me say something. This is what they did to use to destroy Harry Hoxsey, was the interstate commerce, and then they used it the other way here. You see that? Gave porn consumers anonymity and privacy. So they used it both ways. They no longer had to scull about in dingy neighborhoods, casting around fugitive glances in fear of being recognized. 30 million copies of the Adam and Eve catalog are distributed each year, attracting more than 2 million paying customers. All of PHE's products are vetted by consultants from an august-sounding group called the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Harvey's fortune, built one plain brown wrapper at a time, put him in the interesting position of being simultaneously pursued and courted by the federal government. During the late 1980s, while officials at the Justice Department were doing all they could to put Harvey in prison for obscenity violations, officials at the State Department Agency for International Development were working closely with him to make contraceptives widely available in the third world, observes investigator author Eric Schlosser. That's Schloesser. The federal crackdown on the porn industry during the Reagan and Bush, that is the first administration, wiped out many of Harvey's mail order competitors and dissuaded others from entering the business, thereby giving the Ford-funded establishment pornographer what amounts to a federally protected concession. And while Harvey continued to make his rake in money from his mail order skin trade, he still traveled regularly to developing nations to meet with the administration of his family planning projects, known as Schloesser. While the alliance between American porn godfather and the international population control movement may strike some as ironic, it's actually entirely appropriate. All of these people viewed the conventional American middle-class family as the enemy, breaking down the American middle class and preventing other societies from adopting it as a model is their shared objective. In 1967, British population control activist Kingsley Davis pointed out that the social factors relevant to reducing the growth of the human population are beyond the control of family planning. The social structure and the economy must be changed from before a deliberate reduction in the birth rate can be achieved. Changes based enough to affect motivation for having children would be changes in the structure of the family, the position of women, and in the sexual morals. 2 years later, Friedrich Jaffe, president of Planned Parenthood, elaborated on Davis' recommendations in a memorandum to Bernard Berelson, that's Berelson, president of the Population Council. The Population Council was created by none other than David Rockefeller as a means of coordinating international population control efforts. The Berelson Memorandum, which was published in the October 1970 issue of Family Planning Perspective, listed 4 catalogs of population control options: social constraints, economic deterrents, that is /incentives, social controls, and housing policies. Among the social constraints discussed in this population control movement could be found compulsory education of children, the encouragement of increased homosexuality, as well as propaganda and social engineering efforts to alter the image of ideal family. Other draconian measures contemplated in the memo, including placement of fertility control agencies in the water supply. Say that again. Fertility control agents in the water supply, compulsive abortion of out-of-wedlock pregnancies, sterilization of couples following their second child, and the issuing of government's permits to couples as a condition of having children. The clear-cutting society that is for more than 5 centuries, writes Atlantic Monthly investigates reporter Eric Schrossler in his new book called Reefer Madness. Radical social movements have embraced pornography, from Renaissance-era humanism to the humanists to the leaders of the 18th century Enlightenment, including the notorious Marquis de Sade, to the exponents of the San Francisco-based 1960 counterculture. Pornography has been used to bring about a profound shift in public attitudes towards sex as religious influence gave way to secular ones. In the case of 21st century America, that shift has been accomplished with astonishing speed. In the January 1996 issue of the Marxist journal Dissent, Michael Wassler took stock of the victories won by the radical left in the culture war, which he tellingly describes as the Gramsci War of Position. Among the triumphs Wassler listed were the emergence of gay right politics and the attention paid to it in the media, the transformation of family life, the first successful challenge to male authority and traditional division of labor within the home, rising divorcing rates, changing sexual morals, new household arrangements, and again, the portrayal of all this in the media. The progress of secularization, the fading of religion in general, and Christianity, particularly from the public sphere, classrooms, textbooks, legal codes, and holidays, and so on. The legalization of abortion. What Wassler describes as the clear cutting of all social institutions, beginning with the middle-class family, that impede the creation of a total state. Again, many might find it difficult to believe that radical sexual emancipation can coexist with severe political regimentation, but this approach was used quite successfully by the architects of Sweden's all-encompassing social welfare state. Freedom in Swedish is a word that appears to be taboo, observed British journalist Roland Huntford in his 1971 book, The New Totalitarians, a critical study of Sweden's version of cradle-to-grave collectivism. There is one exception, however, and this is the sexual matters. In the same way that security is the creed of sexual socialist politics, so is liberty that of sex. This connection between sexual license and political tyranny was described by Aldous Huxley in his preface to the 1948 edition of his masterpiece called Brave New World. As political and economic freedom diminishes, sexual freedom tends to compensate. That's key, very important here. I'll say this again. As political and economic freedom diminishes, sexual freedom tends to compensatedly to increase. And the dictator, unless he needs cannon fodder, and families which wish to colonize empty or conquer territories, would do well to encourage that freedom. In conjunction with the freedom to daydream under the influence of dope, movies and the radios, that is sexual emancipation, will help to reconcile his subjects to the servitule which is their fate. And that concludes the appendix number 1 today from the book, America's Engineer Decline. Appreciate you being here. That's a long chapter. You know, this is amazing what he's talking about. And again, most people do not know who Gramsci is. But he died at a very young age. He died, I'm trying to remember, he died of some particular disease. I think he died before he was 40 years old. But he opposed Mussolini. It seemed like at one time he was on the right track, that he opposed what was going on, and then something happened dramatically in his life, and he went completely head-to-head with Mussolini, and he was eventually thrown in jail. He eventually got back out. He went to the Soviet Union for a year or two maybe, and then came back, and he was married. And then within a short period of time, he was thrown back into prison, and he basically died at a very young age. I'm not saying I agree with him. No, I'm not. But what he did was he actually was pushing cultural changes. And it's true what this guy's sharing. Mr. Grigg, G-R-I-G-G, is pointing out. And so with the intensive pressure that's being pushed on, that is the dictatorship type of form of government, even here in the United States, then there's a push. Basically what takes place is escape from that. So that's what happens. More harm takes place in the bedrooms of Americans. It's a sad story, folks, a very sad story. So thank you for being here. I'm going to take a break. Hope everybody's doing well. It looks like the sun may be coming out today. It's getting later. So thank you. And again, my channel is Discerning What Is True. I'm found on YouTube and also on Facebook. That's right, Facebook and Odyssey. So thank you for being here. Again, today's the 17th day of February 2023. Enjoy your day and take care.